Hi, I'm Brett Johnson, former United States Most Wanted Cybercriminal, now good guy, and host of The Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode number 59. Once a crook, always a crook? When we come back. All right, so we are back to today's episode of The Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode number 59. Once a crook, always a crook? Geez, I hope not, else I'm in for a bad ending. Reminds me of that movie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Brad Smith looks at Angelina Jolie. Do you think this story has a good ending? And she says, good endings are for stories that haven't finished yet. My God, I hope that's not true. I truly do. So today's episode, we'll get to the meat of that, but we've got some things we have to talk about first. It's been one hell of a news week. Beginning with both Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson were fired from their respective networks. Now, Bretty, this is not a political show. Yes, I know this is not a political show, but hell, you can't just let that shit go and not mention it. Got to be honest with you. I don't like either one of those fellows. I dislike them both immensely. Don Lemon, I don't like because I think they're both they're both smart. But let's be honest, they're both fucking idiots, too. They both suffer from FIS syndrome, fucking idiot syndrome. I was wanting to play a couple of clips from each one to kind of illustrate what I was talking about. And I'm not going to stay on the Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson bit for long. I'm not. Obviously, Tucker Carlson was let go because of the Dominion voting systems settlement, where Fox News said, hey, we'll pay you $787 million so that we don't have to talk about this shit in court, because it's more embarrassing in court than it's ever going to be with the information that's already out there. So Dominion was like, yeah, hell, $787 million. Let's do that. So they paid him off. And of course, Tucker Carlson, he's been talking about that shit a lot. He was one of the figureheads for all that bullshit. So they cut him loose. Now they can scream whatever they want to scream in the media for the alternate reasons that Carlson was, let go, that he was belligerent, that he was talking about the figureheads over there, that he was sexist, that he was anti-Semitic. They can talk about all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's all about the money. And in this case, it's all about $787 million. So that's my view on that. And I don't think I'm very wrong on that. But Carlson came out the other day, actually just a couple of days ago, and he actually had something to say about it. And I just want to play a small clip from the statement that he released.
When you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we have them. Trust me, as someone who's participated.
At least he's self-aware that a lot of the stuff that he talks about is absolute bullshit. The stuff that he rambles on about, he doesn't ramble. He's very pointed on a lot of his debated topics. What I wanted to mention about Tucker Carlson is that while I dislike the gentleman immensely, I disagree with most every point that he's ever made. I have to say that Tucker Carlson gave a platform to talk about things that no other news outlet would talk about. Now, there's going to be somebody out there who says, well, yeah, Brad, he talked about a bunch of bullshit and spread lies and disinformation and propaganda. Is that what you're talking about? Look, we live in a free country. And as a free country, part of that free country means that people can say things, that people should be saying things that we don't agree with. If we all agreed with, if we just had stuff, being spouted out that we agreed with, then that's not really indicative of a free country. It's not. A free country means that people are allowed to say things and should be saying things that we inherently disagree with. And Carlson, he gave a platform for that, and not everything that he talked about was bad. All right, let's not say that he was 100% incorrect on everything he said. He wasn't. but he did serve a purpose for furthering that free speech, whether people agreed with that or not, compared to someone like Don Lemon. And what I pulled up with Mr. Lemon, because I think this is a very interesting little segment here. He's interviewing Morgan Freeman, and this little bit right here.
Pull themselves up. Do you think that race plays a part in wealth distribution, or either a mindset that you can't
today?
Or cannot? Yeah.
No.
You don't?
No, I don't. You and I, we're proof. Why would race have anything to do with it? Put your mind to what you want to do and go for that. It's kind of like religion to me. It's a good excuse for not getting there.
So there we have Don Lemon asking Morgan Freeman, trying to lead him on to say, oh, yeah, race has got everything to do with it, because let's be honest, Don Lemon was always talking about race. He was this baiter. He was always just going on and on about it, blaming every single thing on systemic racism. I'm not saying that racism isn't systemic, but as Morgan Freeman pointed out, no, get off your ass and do something. You can't just continually use things as excuses for one's lot in life. And Morgan Freeman, I think that he is absolutely 100% correct. And you could actually see in that interview with Don Lemon, he's got the chubby. He's like, oh yeah, I got Morgan Freeman, that voice. Morgan Freeman's going to agree with me. And Lemon lobs him the softball, and Morgan Freeman just friggin' destroys it right there. No, I'm not going to agree with you. Well, CNN was paying Mr. Lemon, I guess, $7 million a year. They owe him $25 million on a contract, and they let him go because he was arguing race again with some other guy. It was the interview. I don't know the friggin' interview. I've watched part of it, and nor do I care. I try to avoid Mr. Lemon as much as possible, as much as I do Tucker Carlson. With that being said, let's get off the politics and move over into some more interesting fare. What I would like to mention or talk about, so episode 58 is when the good guys suck. Part 1. Part 2 is going to be coming up sometime in the near to intermediate future. It was going to be about Wampley and about Blue Acorn. Turns out that I have some documents, some of those very privileged, attorney-privileged documents that discuss both Blue Acorn and Wampley and how they facilitated pandemic fraud and profited from that fraud. And there's been a few articles that have been out about this as well. That was going to be the next episode of When the Good Guys Suck. I'm going to lay off of that because an individual who is very instrumental in the Blue Acorn and Wampley affairs has asked me to please not discuss that yet. And I'm not. And the reason that I'm not going to discuss that is, hey, yeah, I could talk about it, but I would much rather see these son of a bitches in prison than Brett Johnson bitching about it on a show. So I'll hold off on that, but I promise it's incoming. What I will do is I'll find some other topics. It's not like they're rare. I'll find some other good guys that suck, and I'll talk about, we'll skewer them. Episode number 58, we skewered chargebacks in 9/11. I recently, in this episode that I'm doing today, as you guys may know, it's a couple of days late. I usually put out everything on Tuesday. Today is Thursday, and I apologize for that, but I took a road trip down to Tampa, Florida, to visit and record with Matt Cox. He is he's a former United States Most Wanted criminal as well. He has turned his life around. He runs an extremely successful YouTube show. He writes, he paints, I'm helping him get some speaking gigs as well, because I think he has a lot of knowledge to share with a lot of different types of industries that are out there. So I went down and recorded with him, and for those who have been following me on Twitter and especially LinkedIn and even this show, you know that I have said that I've got a large degree of apathy toward a lot of different people and companies in cybersecurity and fraud, things like that. And the reason why it started with, and I mentioned this to Matt when we recorded on the show as well, but it started with Blue Acorn and Wamply. It was actually before that. But what happens is these articles come out about Blue Acorn and Wamply and how they facilitated, how they actually helped criminals commit stimulus fraud. And let's be clear, stimulus fraud, by the time everything's tallied up, over $1 trillion were paid out to fraudsters. And most of those fraudsters who committed those crimes will never be caught, arrested, prosecuted, whatever. They've got away with it. They've pocketed the money, and they're living high on the hog due to taxpayers and due to the federal government not putting in any type of security in place for 6 months, and due to companies like Blue Acorn and Wamply who helped facilitate that type of crime. That's exactly what happened. So these articles come out a few months ago, and they were posting them on LinkedIn, and a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. What happened was fraud professionals out there didn't want to talk about it. They didn't comment on these articles at all. Now, here's what I know. If I post something, or anyone else on LinkedIn posts something about a cyber criminal, some identity thief out there, some quote unquote hacker that's out there that's attacking infrastructure or merchants or financial institutions or fintechs or crypto companies, you say anything about those guys, and boy, let me tell you what, they come out of the woodwork on LinkedIn to comment, to skewer, to just, oh yeah, we got to get them. We got to get them. We can't stand all this breaking the law, breaking the law. What happened though is when you call out a company, when there's an article out there about a company who's helping fraudsters succeed, at that point, there's a lot of crickets that are around LinkedIn and around merchants and retailers and fintechs and crypto companies and infrastructure companies and security companies. No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to mention that. So they keep their little asses quiet in the hopes that no one will look their way and it'll all blow over. And that happened. It really pissed me off when these articles on Blue Acorn and Wamply came out several months ago. And it blew over. They kept their damn mouths shut on LinkedIn. And within a week or two, it was gone. Well, a couple weeks ago, for those who have watched 58, When Good Guys Suck Part 1, a couple weeks ago, the FTC and the state of Florida, they filed complaints against Chargebacks 9/11. And I've explained that on the show, and I've been bitching about that a lot on my social media platform and on different shows that I've been appearing on, because merchants, retailers, fraud professionals, security companies, and other assorted peeps and organizations on LinkedIn, guess what? They've not said a damn word about what was alleged against Chargebacks 9/11, those deceptive and illegal practices that I went through on episode 58. They've kept their damn mouths shut. Now, I attribute that to fear of losing a job, a contract, a client, a friend. There was a person that reached out to me on LinkedIn, and they pointed out, hey, it's not just fear of losing profit, but it's fear of prosecution. It's fear of litigation. It's fear of blackmail. And that makes a lot of sense to me too, because, you know, if you are a client of someone like Chargebacks 9/11 and you've engaged in these deceptive and illegal practices, you certainly don't want law enforcement looking at you. You don't want your customers, those consumers that you've been screwing over, looking at you either. And the blackmail makes sense because all of a sudden, hey, you know, if you're a client or you knew what was going on, that makes a difference. Or maybe you're a conference that's being sponsored and you're in the industry. And do you know? Yeah, I'm going to tell you what, for those people out there, I don't know who I'm talking to today on this, because I guess I'm talking to consumers more, because people in the industries, whether you're a merchant, you're a retailer, you're a chargebacks company, you're a security company, you're a conference, what have you. Most people know what's going on. Is it surprising that Chargebacks 9/11, the biggest chargebacks company, was doing this bullshit? It is surprising to a degree. But a lot of people knew what was going on. And here's my thought. It's not just Chargebacks 911 that was doing it. I'm thinking that some of those other companies that are being quiet as church mice, I'm thinking that maybe they were doing some of this bullshit too. And I don't think I'm wrong on that. So you consumers that are out there, if you've ever instituted a chargeback and you've had your chargeback denied, it would behoove you to figure out who was doing the chargebacks for this merchant or retailer. Was it Chargebacks 911? Because if it was Chargebacks 911, the chances of you being screwed over, of them using deceptive and illegal practices to win the chargeback dispute against you, according to the state of Florida and the FTC, it's pretty damn high. So you need to make sure, you need to be reaching out, figuring out what's going on, raising a lot of hell. To everyone out there that's remaining quiet, you know, I truly believe, and I've been saying this for several months, I truly believe that we should treat each other the way that we would want to be treated. As I said before, we're very good about, people in this industry are very good about pointing at the known bad guys, those criminals that are on Telegram, on the dark web, using stolen credit card details, or committing refund fraud, or new account fraud, or synthetic fraud, or stimulus fraud, or whatever the fraud it is. Everyone's very good about pointing those people out, about demonizing these people. I'm going to be honest with you. When you are engaged in practices like Chargebacks 911 is alleged to have been doing, and you're helping to cover that up by just remaining quiet and hoping that it blows over, you are no better than those people that you are demonizing, that are over on Telegram, the dark web, all these criminal channels and forums. You're absolutely no better than that. You are facilitating it. You are conspiring to get past it. So all these comments that you guys have been making, that anyone's that knew what was going on with some of these chargebacks, and you're being quiet, or maybe your company's, let it be known, don't say anything on social media about any of this bullshit or whatever that is. You really are no better than any credit card thief that's out there. Just bear that in mind. I would really implore you to, like I say at the end of my show, just do the right damn thing. If you were in one of these consumers' positions where you were entitled to that chargeback, and you know that the company that was disputing the chargebacks for you lied and committed a crime in order to win that chargeback, and you're remaining quiet, would you want to be done the same way? Would you want to be a victim on that end? Because make no mistake, those consumers who lost chargebacks due to deceptive and illegal practices, they are victims. You have helped to victimize them, and by remaining quiet, you continue to victimize them. Please, just think about this and do the right goddamn thing. At some point, you got to stand up and speak out. At some point, you got to do that. If you don't stand for something, at the end of the day, you will fall for anything. Okay. Now, moving right along. I guess this is already the Q&A session. We got a little bit different today. There was a set number of posts that I've been looking, that I wanted to comment on. The first is about ransomware. So let me share screen, and we're going to walk through all these points really quickly and then go from there. Okay. So this is from LinkedIn, and you'll notice I commented on it. Turns out, so RSA is this week. RSA is like the circus of cybersecurity. It's in San Francisco. They hold it once, I guess once a year. I've been to it a couple of times, and every time I go to it, I'm ready to go after 10 minutes. You go on the floor, they've got DeLoreans, they've got big ass mechs, they've got all this stuff trying to get people to buy security products and services. All these security companies are advertising. And what I have typically seen is that a lot of the companies on there, they try to sell products with FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Will scare potential clients into buying our security products and services. And as people should know, I absolutely disagree with that bullshit. Well, it turns out one of the people that spoke at RSA, and what he said was he's talking about ransomware. And so those who may not be in the industry, law enforcement and a lot of security companies and a lot of people who really don't understand what the hell is going on from a business point of view, they take the concrete moral approach to things, that absolute morality, and they say, hey, you should never pay any type of ransomware attacker. If you get hit with ransomware, if you get your data locked down and encrypted, don't pay. Regardless, don't pay, never pay at all. It's kind of like the whole terrorism thing. We never negotiate. And they tell you too, don't even negotiate with these ransomware people. Just start building things back. Well, you know what? That's a really nice idea on paper. In the real world, though, we don't have big rock candy mountains. People don't ride around on unicorns. In the real world, things are different. So what this guy says is he basically says that he's like, hey, deciding whether or not to pay a ransom then must be an informed decision that takes various factors into account without the knee-jerk response of balking at giving attackers what they want purely because it's not seen as the right thing to do. And that guy's name that gave that speech is the CEO of Triton Tech Consulting, Brandon Clark. Well, I can't disagree with that. But what surprises me is that RSA gave this dude a keynote so that he could say this shit. And I got to be honest with you, people in the know, people who really understand what the hell is going on with cybercrime and cybersecurity, we have been saying this shit for years. You can talk about all day long. You can say it all day long. Hey, you should never pay. You should never pay. You should never pay. Here's what I know, though. If it's a big if, it's like if a frog had wings, it wouldn't bump its ass. If a specific company has done everything they needed to do in the lead up to being hit with ransomware, I absolutely agree that you shouldn't pay. You should start rebuilding your system because you have laid the groundwork in anticipation of being hit with ransomware. You've done everything you needed to do. That's groovy. That's great. Here's what I know, though. Very few companies do that. There's a reason that 90% plus of every single attack uses known exploits. And that reason is because most companies don't prep for attacks. They don't give a shit about being attacked until they're already attacked. So, as such, a company gets hit with ransomware. If they don't have backups deployed properly, if they don't have the tools to decode the backups deployed properly, if they don't understand that, hey, sometimes if you've got 49 petabytes worth of data being sent across a copper line to restore those backups, it may take you 40 years to restore backups. If they've not tested everything and prepped and laid the groundwork in anticipation of being hit, as you know, over 90% of companies out there have not, and they get hit with ransomware, and they have to have that data in order for their company to operate, you're damn right they are going to pay that ransom. They're going to reach out to one of these ransomware negotiation companies, and here's what I'm going to say right now. A lot of these ransomware negotiation companies, they are outstanding. They're populated by former FBI guys. There's one called Cove that I absolutely love these guys. I think they do an outstanding job. They negotiate. They get the keys to unlock your files, restore everything there. I think it's outstanding. Okay. If you have to have that data for your company to thrive, you are going to pay the ransom. That's all there is to it. Are you really going to sit back and let everything shut down, not run your company and go out of business because, I want to take the moral high ground? or I think I can just wing it and build everything back from scratch. No, you're not. You're not. All right. So, and I got some feedback when I pointed this out. My response was, I said, hey, because say one thing about me, I'm going to speak out. So I said, so basically this speaker said what most of us in the know have been saying for years about ransomware. The idea of never pay, never negotiate is great on paper, but this is the real world. So I got some blowback on that. I did. I got some people that kind of took exception to that a little bit. They were like, one guy over on Twitter, he's like, oh, I don't think the industry says that at all. And then this dude decides that, oh, I'm going to pull the expert card, instead of just going with what Brett Johnson says. Not that I would have any experience at all in the criminal world. I wouldn't know what I'm talking about. I just helped build the goddamn thing. But this guy starts tagging some other people. Lisa Fort, for example, she's outstanding. He tags her. Well, Lisa, what do you think about this? Lisa responds within a couple of minutes. Well, you know what? I think that we've been saying this. The people who are really in the trenches have been saying this for years. So much to his chagrin, he went away. But there was, I had some people saying that. One person said that, it's a thing of how do you know you'll get your data back because you're dealing with a criminal. And I'm going to tell you how you know you'll get your data back. Experience. Now, here's what you got to understand. Not all criminals are the same. All right. Not all ransomware groups are the same either. For the really good ransomware groups that know that it's a business and understand that when they hit you with ransomware and you pay the ransom, you are going to get your data back. Why is that? Well, for example, I'll tell you why that is. If a criminal attacker goes out there and starts installing ransomware on different systems, say he hits 100 companies, all right, and he says, you pay me X amount of dollars, I'm going to give your data back. All these companies pay the X amount of dollars, and then he says, fuck you, I'm not giving your data back. What happens at that point? Well, that guy who's going out installing ransom, he's not going to be in business for very long because that specific ransomware is going to be associated with, hey, they don't turn your data back on at all. So people have no impetus, no motivation to pay the ransom. As such, most skilled attackers who are playing around with ransomware, attacking with ransomware, when they tell you, pay X amount of dollars and we'll get your data back, they absolutely mean that. As a matter of fact, some of these ransomware groups will have a criminal attacker that will remote in and help you restore all of the data that they encrypted once you pay the ransom. Now, as I said, not all criminals are the same. You do have some friggin' idiots out there that don't understand that, hey, this is a business, and if you don't follow through on your business promise, you aren't going to stay in business very long. But there are some out there that will not restore data. All right. They've got some sort of bullshit program and they don't care. They take the money and run. Well, they don't stay in business for very long. Most skilled attackers will follow through on that because they want to stay in business. Now, I really don't get. Here's the thing. I don't understand how people in the security industry, and it's not everyone, it's a few people, but there are a few in the security industry that don't get that. They really have a disconnect when it comes to how criminals operate, all right, and why criminals operate that way and everything that goes on in these criminal environments. And they really, the disconnect is so severe that they start to say things and it's obvious that, hey, dude, you have no clue what's going on. And to illustrate such, that is not, that was the ransomware. What I also did, the past couple of days, every now and then I'll go over to Telegram and I'll pull out, I'll pull up something of interest and I'll share it. And what I've pulled up recently, I can't even pull it up on this because it's desktop. Well, you guys may not know, but this is a turnkey from Telegram. This is a turnkey criminal business for sale. This guy is selling a one-time password bot service that generates a monthly profit of $30,000, and he's selling it for a one-time fee of $22,000. So I shared that, and you see it's got like 2,400 views on there, and it's got 27 people that like it, and typically this will end at like 8 or 10,000 views, and it got some feedback too. And some of the feedback that it got, where is this? If I can find this guy. Actually, that's another post. But what I wanted to talk about this, and I'll talk about what this other guy said in a second. So the question becomes, why is this guy selling a service that generates for him, he profits $30,000 a month on this service? So that's what he's taking home. He's taking home, once he pays for his infrastructure and all the bots that he's running and to deploy them, and if he's got to change servers or whatever the guy's doing, once he does that every single month, he still puts in his pocket $30,000. Yet, for some reason, he's selling the whole shebang for $22K out the door. Why? Why are you selling that, dude? So I talked about that, and I think this is important. This goes into this disconnect that most people, not most, but a few people in cybersecurity really don't get. And it's not just in cybersecurity. I've also noticed this disconnect when we're talking about a classroom environment. Universities that are educating on cybersecurity and cybercrime, there's a huge disconnect between the book learning and what they're teaching in classrooms and the way that criminals actually operate. So I like to come in every now and then and talk about some of this bullshit. And what I got to on this is, why is this guy selling? Now, when I ran Shadow Crew, one of the lessons that I used to teach, I used to preach this all the time. A vendor or seller will continue to deliver a product or service as long as it is viable for them to do so. Once it's no longer viable for them to do so, they will no longer continue that. Now, that's money mules. For example, a lot of money mules out there, as long as they think that somebody's going to continue to give them the ability to make money, they're not going to rip off the person that they're laundering money for, the person they're pulling cash out for. They're going to continue to give them their cut, whether that cut's 60-40, 70-30, what have you. And why is that? Well, yeah, the guy's a criminal, but he understands that, hey, yeah, I could take all the money from this one cash out and walk away with it. Or, this guy over in the Ukraine, he's got a shitload more cash outs for me. So I'll send him his cut because I'm going to make a lot more money in the long run instead of just the one-time stealing bit. And to be fair, again, all criminals are not the same. You'll have some guys that will absolutely, Ukrainian Russian thinks he's got him a money mule and it's going to cash out. A guy goes and pulls, $10,000 out of an ATM, supposed to send $7,000 of it overseas, and doesn't. He pockets all $10,000. You have that goes on frequently. All right. That's a cost of doing business. The Ukrainians, the Russians, they know that bullshit. It's a cost of doing business. The more skilled money mules that are out there, they understand that hey, no, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll send my, the 6,000 or 7,000 overseas because I'm going to be getting every single day more of these accounts to cash out. All right. And he'll continue to do that until he thinks that Russian or Ukrainian is no longer going to supply him with accounts. And at that point, that's when he starts to pocket all the money. It is no longer viable for him to continue to do that act. Okay. In the place of this market, this one-time password bot that's being sold. In the place of that, it's really the same thing. This seller historically would continue to provide that product or service as long as it was viable for him to do so. Something has happened that no longer makes it viable for him to continue to operate this service. Now, what is that? Now, it could be law enforcement. That's absolutely one of the big things there. Law enforcement is on the guy's ass. The guy may have got his ass indicted on something else. Any number of things law enforcement associated. Maybe one of his buddies got arrested and he knows his buddy is soft, soft as cotton, and he's going to rat on him. So he's like, I'm shutting everything down right now. I'm going to sell this out the door, walk away. So that's absolutely one of the things that could have happened. Another thing that could have happened is that, and we know this on the cybersecurity side, they're ramping up security to defeat these one-time password bots. So they're no longer as effective as they once were. So as security ramps up, that service is likely to go out of business sometime in the very near future. So instead of holding on to it as it's going downhill, this guy's like, hey, I'll go ahead and sell it now, pocket what I can. So that's another reason. The final reason is that he could have moved on to greener pastures. So one of the market services that's being offered right now from various different vendors is the ability of stealing cookies from login sessions. So Genesis did that before Genesis got popped. Evil Proxy does that. So there's several different marketplaces that do this as well. What happens is a bot sits on someone's network. Person goes to sign in to Chase or Wells or Bank of America or some fintech company or whatever, and it captures the cookie of that. And if the actual legitimate customer has multi-factor authentication deployed, that stealing the cookie actually bypasses the multi-factor authentication too. It's an extremely effective attack. So it could be that this guy is like, hey, I'm just going to open up shop and start doing this stuff because the money that I'll make from this is much higher than that $30K that I've been making on the one-time password system that I've got in place. So it could be any number of things like that. And the reason I say this, the reason I wanted to show this is, again, to understand. I actually had to talk with some law enforcement friends about another service that was being sold a few weeks ago. And the question came up, why would somebody who's making money sell their criminal enterprise? Why would that happen? And so I walked through the exact same reasons here. Could be any number of things, but at the end of the day, it boils down to something has happened that makes it no longer viable for that seller to continue selling that service. And typically those top three reasons, law enforcement, ramped up security, or greener pastures, those top three reasons tend to ping it right there. It's going to be one or a combination of those top three, typically. All right, so moving right along. Now, don't worry, we're getting to the meat of the episode in just a couple of minutes. So, wanted to share screen one more time. Share screen, Bretty. All right, I'm sharing. All right, so this right here, again, from Telegram. This guy from Fraud Studies, his name is Booker Sticks. He's looking for a business partner from the United States. We could be making $30,000 to $53,000 weekly if you're honest and trustworthy with me, broha. I guess he tried to say brother, but that's what he said. So what do we know about this right here? Okay, so first of all, we know that Booker Sticks is not in the United States. As I've said when I've talked about the three necessities of cybercrime, one of the reasons that it's never a single attacker, those three necessities, gathering data, committing crime, cashing out, one single attacker can't do all three things. The reasons why, typically two, is a skill gap. That attacker, that criminal doesn't know how to do one of the things, or it's a problem with geographic location. That criminal is simply in a geographic area where they cannot. This guy right here, Booker Sticks, is in a geographic area where he cannot fulfill one of those necessities. Which necessity? Cashing out. He can't pull money out of ATMs in Africa or the Ukraine or South America or Russia or wherever the hell he is. He's in an area where he can't do that. So he's looking for someone, says it right here. He's looking for someone from the United States, and we're going to make a lot of money. Okay? That's what he's looking for, and he needs somebody to be trustworthy. We're going to make a lot of money. So he needs that money mule stateside. Now, here's what I know. I know that he's not only looking for a U.S. guy, I know the accounts that he's cashing out are U.S., and I know that he is not in the United States. Now, we could start breaking down. I could go through some of his different posts, and we could start breaking down his use of language and kind of try to ping where this guy's actually located. And you can actually do that fairly successfully. We're not in that game today. We're talking about this specific post. So he's looking for this guy. And I walk through. Most likely the guy is needing someone to cash out. His problem is geographic. He is in an area that makes that difficult. So he has to network with someone who can cash out and send him his cut. Someone in the United States. So we're dealing with USA accounts. Also understand that this guy is likely doing all of the work except the cash out. I would expect that to mean a 60-40 or 70-30 split. So Booker Sticks, when I say he's doing all of the work, he's stealing the accounts. He's gaining access to the accounts. So it could be debit cards. It could be access to, ATOs on bank accounts, so account takeovers on bank accounts. Maybe he's doing cookie injections, whatever, okay? But whatever's going on, he needs a money mule. Now, this money mule, the money mule may be just taking counterfeit debit cards, taking to an ATM, pulling them out. Or the money mule may need to be setting up cash out accounts. So he may need to set up, he may need to get prepaid debit cards. He may need to set up bank accounts. He may need to set up Chime or Cash App accounts, PayPal accounts, whatever that is, some sort of account in order to cash the money out that's being sent. That's the job of the money mule. The Booker Sticks, the main criminal, he may set up those accounts for him. That's possible. That depends on the interaction between the two. What I can tell you is that the majority of work is being done by Booker Sticks. He's getting the information. He's committing the crime. The actual cashing out, putting cash in pocket, is done by this USA contact that he's looking for. Now, the way that breaks down, Booker is doing most of the work. Now, you would think, well, how much does a money mule make? Well, at the end of the day, if you can't put cash in pocket, you're pretty friggin' worthless. Why do any of it? So that end bit of cashing out is really important, and it's worth a lot of money. There's a reason that some of these marketplaces, you have some vendors on there, some sellers that say, hey, if you've got accounts that will cash out, I'll give you 5 cents on the dollar for that. Because sometimes the attackers, you take the Nigerians, for example, these idiots, and they're not all idiots, but in this case they were. The Nigerians, they stole like $400 million initially, and they did a lot more than that, but $400 million committing unemployment fraud, all right? They really were only able to pocket a few $1,000,000 because they did not anticipate how successful that crime was going to be. They didn't think they were going to be able to steal that much money, and then they were, and they didn't have the accounts in place in order to cash it out. So if you've got some guy that's able to steal or have $10 million sent to an account, all right, it's difficult to get that $10 million out of an account. You've got to have a system in place, because here's what you can't take your ATM card and withdraw $10 million in a day. Ain't going to happen. You can't go to the desk of the bank, the financial institution that has that $10 million in the account, and say, I'll take that in cash, please. That shit ain't going to happen either. So you've got to have a system in place where you can have that initial deposit sent, and then you can disperse it to all these other accounts, money mules, to pull all of that money out. Nigerians didn't have that in place. And there's a reason, for example, if you've got $10 million, you get one of these guys on one of these darknet marketplaces that is a money launderer that knows how this shit is actually in place. He's already got a system set up. So what they typically say is they'll say, hey, usual fee is 30%, where you've just got this in place and everything. I'll give you, 18 cents on the dollar. And the criminal, because they don't have a network, they understand that 18 cents on the dollar is worth a hell of a lot more than 0 cents on the dollar. So they sign on to that. Typically, for money mules like this guy's looking for, doesn't take a whole lot of work, 30%, sometimes 40%. And sometimes that money mule will have a set of guys that he has to pay as well out of his 30 or 40%, okay? The reason I brought this up, and I was so not only explaining that to you guys, but also there was a gentleman, Ruben, that says, yeah, but you have to be honest and trustworthy. So here's the thing, all right? Honest and trustworthy. I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. But it goes back to that lesson that I just talked about. A vendor or seller will continue to deliver a product or service as long as it's viable for them to do so. Absolutely. Now, that's rule number one. Also consider that criminal environments have a trust mechanism in place. How do I know that? Because I built the goddamn thing. All right. You have that forum type structure where people share and exchange information, where you can read reviews. You have escrow systems in place. You have vouching systems in place. So there's a difference between a money mule that just comes up on a forum one day, registered 2 days earlier, that no one knows anything about, and a money mule that's been on a forum, a trusted forum, for months or years, and who has a history and a background of providing legitimate services, legitimate criminal services. Yes, that's an oxymoron, but that doesn't make it less true. All right, so this is this idea of this disconnect. You've got people that fight cybercrime, fight fraud, fight identity theft all day, every day. They've actually chosen a career in that. And for some reason, some of these people, they don't understand. The reason I say that, yes, it's a bit of a plug, but the reason I say that is there's value in people like me. All right. Certainly, I've been on the good guy side. I know the language of the good guy side now. I know how security services operate from the good guy side, everything else. I'm well respected in this industry these days. I was well respected in my criminal industry as well. There are people out there who actually know what they're talking about, who can share the criminal mindset with people. One of the people is the show that I just went and I appeared on the other day, the Matt Cox show, this true crime, inside true crime. He's a former most wanted guy. He knows what he's doing. He understands that. All right. Understand that all criminals are different. He's just now getting in the speaking and consulting bit of things. But the reason I say that is, and this leads into the meat of our show today. The reason I say that is that it's important to be open-minded and to look for that knowledge, to understand, like, hey, I don't know everything. I don't even pretend to know everything. I know a whole shitload of stuff, but if I don't know something, I'll tell you guys, I don't know that. I don't know a damn thing about that. All right. But there are people in this industry, I guess it's, I don't know what it is, but they get something, this almost dogmatic view of things. And when they're hit with something that disagrees with that, they really don't want to be open-minded about things. If you're going to fight these types of crime, if you're going to be successful, you have to be open-minded. You have to understand the criminal mindset, and you should absolutely engage with people who have been on that side of the fence and who have turned their lives around. So when we come back, we're going to get in the meat of the episode number 59. What is that? I forgot the damn title of it. Episode number 59, Once a Crook, Always a Crook, when we come back. All right, so we're back to the Brett Johnson Show, episode number 59, Once a Crook, Always a Crook. Look, I promised you we'd come back from that short break and get right into the meat of the episode. However, as I took that break myself, I looked at one of the messages that I got on the YouTube channel. And this gentleman, not 2 minutes ago, he sent me a message, and I would just like to read that out and respond to it because I think it's important. I truly do. So this is from Mike Allison. And what he says is, he says, man, oh man. Actually, let me go ahead and share the screen and we can read this together. All right. So this is from Mike Allison. And he sent me this note. And he says, man, oh man, I've binge watched your videos. You've actually saved me from making a poor choice in life to commit a crime for money. It's been a real struggle for me. I've worked hard in construction for 14 years now, only 2 different companies. Never been fired or laid off, but the money just isn't here. Even working 7 days a week, I struggle. I was with a girl for a few years, and we had a child. We fought and argued about money all the time. She left me and took away my son when he was just 8 months old. My son turned 5, and I see him every other weekend. The weekends I don't have him, I have to work or I can't make ends meet. I've never missed a child support payment, but I've missed the electric, internet, car, and cell phone a few times. As soon as I get my head back above water, we get a rain spell, and we can't work in the rain. Back under I go. I'm a millennial, so I have full understanding of a lot of the different ways to do cyber fraud. But the thought of being in jail and losing time with my son. I was really thinking about it a lot lately. Then I just happened to stumble across your video, and it really snapped me back into reality. I'll get to the top of this mountain eventually. It beats being behind bars every day. I just wanted to, I read that. So what happens is when I record my intro, and usually I'll stop the video at that point and I'll shove that in a folder. Then I'll record the Q&A session. And sometimes it runs very long like today's. And then I'll stop that recording and put it in a separate folder. And then I go into the meat of the episode and put that in a third thing. And during these, I'll check my emails and my messages and Twitter feed and all this stuff. And I checked the YouTube comments there. And this guy had responded. And I just wanted to address that. Man, Mr. Allison, I lived my life until I was in my 40s committing crime. A long history of it. I started, as you've watched my videos now, so you know, I started when I was 10 years old, shoplifting, and continued to go from there. And a lot of that criminal activity, it didn't make me a lot of money. You know, it made ends meet. And it wasn't until I got into cybercrime that I started to steal a lot of money. And I don't brag about that because I really don't think there's anything to brag about when it comes to hurting people, to victimizing people. I truly mean that. I just don't say that in order to try to convince people. Okay, I don't just pull that out of my ass. I lived a life of lying to people, lying to myself, lying to friends, family members, lying to victims in order to defraud them, lying to companies. I lied to everybody. Hell, I was married to my first wife. I was married to her for 9 years, and I don't think that, actually, it's not even think. I know that we didn't have a real conversation for those 9 years until she left me. And as I was taking her back from, we were in Carlson, South Carolina, and I was taking her back home to Hazard, Kentucky. And that drive from Charleston, South Carolina, back to Hazard, Kentucky, that was the first real conversation that we had in that entire 9-year marriage. Okay. So I lived a very despicable life until it landed me in prison. And then I screwed over the Secret Service agents who were trying to befriend me and give me a chance to not go to prison. You know, I lied to them, and I continued to lie. It wasn't until I was out of prison, and not only out of prison, but after I recidivated, that I decided not to lie anymore, that I decided to turn my life around. And what gave me that opportunity was people giving me a chance, the support group that I've got in place still today, of people giving me the opportunity, that chance of validating that I could do the right thing. You have been doing the right thing. You've not lived that life of crime that I chose to live. And I say chose to live because I didn't have to. I did not have to break the law. I did not have to be a liar and a thief and a scammer and just a despicable human being. I chose that. You today, you say you work 7 days a week sometimes when it's not raining just to make ends meet. I've got absolutely nothing but respect for you. And I wanted to say that. That's more important than the meat of today's show. I wanted to say that. I want you to know that I have absolutely nothing but respect for you out there working like you're working just to make ends meet. And hey, God bless you for not missing any of those child support payments. All right. And I know that you don't get to see your son that often. But what I would say to you is to just keep your son in mind. All right. Just know that because, hey, my mom left my dad, and I didn't get to see my dad. My two stepsons, their dad doesn't really have part of their lives. He's not very, he's not in it. What I would say is that has an effect on your son. Please let your son know, whether you see him or not. I don't know how old he is now, but as often as you possibly can, whether you're seeing him or not, let him know that you love him. Let him know that you're thinking of him. All right. Let him know that you're there for him. Call him. I don't know how old he is again, but call him. Let him know. If once he gets old enough to get a cell phone or whatever, text him every single day. If you don't say anything else, just let him know you love him, because it matters. It matters. All right. You're worried right now about breaking the law. And I tell you, when I was a child, you're talking about missing the electric, missing the water, the internet payment, TV payment, whatever that is. I went through that as a child. We were in Panama City, Florida. And I remember that my dad, he was working at 7-Eleven as a night manager, and he couldn't afford to pay the bills. So sometimes we'd have our electric cut off. Sometimes we'd have our water cut off. I remember to this day that we'd have our water cut off, and we'd get out there with pots and pans when it rained and try to catch enough water to wash off with and to brush our teeth with and stuff like that. So I know what you're going through, man. I know what you're going through. And I know that temptation. I know the temptation when you can, hey, I can make some quick money. Well, you're not making it. You'd be stealing it. All right. But I know that temptation. I know what that feels like, because, hey, I felt that recently, man. During the pandemic, I was scared to death that I was going to go back into fraud. And you reaching out like you are right now, even to somebody like me, I mean, you should be, I'll talk to you. Hey, you can email me. I'm going to respond to your message here in just a few minutes as soon as I close this show out. And I'm going to give you my email address, and we'll talk things through. Okay. So I'll be a support group for you, but you also need to get that support group wherever you are now. You guys you're working with, your associates, your friends, your family members. You need to be voicing this to them. Hey, man, I'm worried I'm going to go out and commit a crime. And those people will circle around you. And the ones that don't, the ones that say, oh, you got to do what you got to do, those are the people you know not to fuck with. Those are the people you need to cut off and not talk to anymore. But you need to build that support group of people that are healthy, that will help you get through this. Okay. And I don't know what to tell you about money. I don't. What I would say is it's a long process. We're going through economic times right now. But, let's talk. I'll help you as much as I can. Walk you through that. For what I would say right now is, let your son know you love him. Also understand you've not made that choice yet to commit crime. It's a choice. It's a choice. And when you make that choice, if you ever make that choice to commit a crime, what you're saying is that you are putting that act, that choice, above the choice of seeing your son, even if it is just every other weekend. You're making the choice of doing that. You're making the choice of victimizing people instead of helping people. All right. And I think you know that. I don't think I'm saying anything that you probably don't already know, because, again, you've made the choice not to commit crime right now. All right. But just understand that if you ever make that choice, that is your choice to do that. All right. It's not, don't ever think I didn't have any choice but to do it. Yeah, you do. You do. All right. So I'm going to take another quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the meat of the show. Once a crook, always a crook. Because I don't think that's true. But we're going to talk about it when we come back to the Brett Johnson Show. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Finally, the meat of today's episode number 59. Once a crook, always a crook. So I guess that we should start by talking about what brought this episode on. And what brought it on was this post right here. This is on LinkedIn. This is from Fraud Unmasked. And they were talking about, they gave an example of, said a convicted con artist who wrote a book on consumer fraud and dedicated it to the Los Angeles federal judge who freed him on probation 3 times was arrested by the FBI Friday for bilking a new victim out of $100,000. Stephen Robert Commissar, age 38, was taken into custody after and being indicted on 8 counts of mail and wire fraud. Since his early telemarketing fraud convictions in 91 and 94, Commissar has touted himself as a reformed con man and written a book titled America's Guide to Fraud Prevention, which he dedicated to this U.S. District Judge Manuel L. Real. And that was back in 1999. I think they ended up giving that sumbitch the maximum, as they should have. So what I did was, there was somebody who commented about, it's what I said was, the truth is very rare that any fraudster goes legit. I think there is a variety of reasons for that. And as I thought about the reasons, it hit me that it would make an excellent episode of the Brett Johnson Show, episode number 59. And I gave some examples of some working titles. Once a crook, always a crook. Can a fraudster change its stripes? Do criminals ever really change? And I said, I'll need to work on the title. And Fraud Unmasked responded, hey, we're looking forward to that. And if you could, please include your insights of how the justice system in the United States could be adjusted to help have a better impact on lowering the high recidivism rate. So I was like, hey, that's actually an outstanding topic for a show. Instead of talking about fraud and crime all the time, we talk about some of the effects. And so I wanted to do the show on that. At the same time, a couple of weeks ago, I did a podcast interview, and it was a group. I forgot what the name of the podcast was. I appear on a lot of podcasts, and you guys will have to forgive me. So most of the time, I remember the name of the show. This I don't. All right. But one of the questions that was asked was an outstanding question. And it really got me right during the interview. They mentioned, because I talk about when I went to prison, that I took cognitive behavioral therapy, this 9-month intensive therapy session, peer-reviewed, and it's ran by, other prisoners as well. I mean, you've got counselors there, but really the inmates run everything. But it teaches this cognitive behavioral therapy that your thoughts determine your feelings determine your actions. If you change the thought process, at the end of the day, the feelings will change. And I've said this consistently over the past few years, that it had a profound effect on my life. The guys who were interviewing me on this podcast, they asked me, it's like, well, okay, so it had such a profound effect on your life. You got out of prison, but you went back to commit crime again. What the hell, Brett? And it hit me because no one had really asked that kind of pointed question before. I discuss it to a degree in the Anglerfish podcast, but I've not really done a lot of self-reflection on that. If cognitive behavioral therapy is so successful, why did I go back to commit crime? Because the truth of the matter is that when I got out of prison with the idea of, hey, I'm going right back to it again. All right. I was met by my dad, who people who know, he helped me escape. And I taught him how to do tax fraud. So he met me with gift cards and cash and everything else like that. And I was fully intent on going back and committing crime again, fully intent on that. Okay. At the same time, I had a really sour taste in my mouth about internet crime. So it was this push me, pull you between wanting to do it and not. This prep thing, I guess, always doing prep thing. And I did recidivate. You know, I tell the story of it got to the point where, you know, I was bumming money. I didn't want to commit internet fraud. Part of me did, part of me didn't. Didn't want to commit internet fraud. It got to the point I was bumming money from my dad, bumming money from my sister Denise. I had moved out of my dad's house, and I had a roommate that was taking care of half the rent, and I was on food stamps. You know, I was getting that, I don't know, $200-300 a month on food stamps. They call it EBT now. And I'd go to this place called the Grocery Outlet in Panama City. That was the cheapest groceries you could get, cheaper than Save a Lot. And I'd, you know, stock up on what I could afford for the month. And that's how I was eating. And I got to the point that I had enough money to buy cat food, and I didn't have money to buy toilet paper. I went to down on Front Beach Road in Panama City Beach. They've got this Dollar General store. So I went in there and bought the cat. The cat's name was Monster. Bought the cat some food. And on the way out, they had a kiosk there with toilet paper on there. And I shoplifted toilet paper because I didn't want to go back in and commit cybercrime. Part of me did, part of me didn't. And so these interviewers ask, you know, hey, if CBT is so successful, why did you go back and commit crime? Why did you have the idea that you wanted to do that? Understand that, and I talk about this on Anglerfish, I truncate it when it comes to presentations, because what happens is yeah, I steal toilet paper. I meet my wife, Michelle, now, and I move in with her, get a job cutting grass, not committing crime, cutting grass. That job ends. And when it ended, you know, that typically the reason that I commit crime is because I want to prove myself in a relationship, that it's, you know, I've got to show them that I'm worth it. I'm not worth it just me being there. So I have to, you know, do something, you know, provide. Always that provider, you know. And my sister mentioned that to me the other day, that we both have that problem. She provides by making things, okay, by crafting things. That's how she provides to her family. I provide by bringing money in, by giving things, okay. And we've had that problem. And then the reason that we have that is because when we were children, I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. Denise figured that out. But when we were children, that's how we were valued, by what we could produce. And it continues to be that way today. You know, I'm fighting that. I'm becoming healthier. Those who have listened to my story know that, you know, I recidivated. What happened was the job with cutting grass ended. Figure I have to show myself, you know, show I'm worth it. Michelle's the only one working. So I get some stolen credit cards, start ordering food. Those who have listened to the Anglerfish podcast, that life story of mine, it wasn't just food. You know, it starts with food. Then, hey, kids need clothes. Christmas is coming up, blah, 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 blah. And I get caught on a food order. And I'm very fortunate with that what happened is Michelle showed me that she didn't need me for what I could give her. She just wanted me for me. And that transition, that realization made all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world, because I'd never been in a relationship where someone just wanted me for me. They always wanted me for what I was doing, for that providing, bringing the money in, bringing the goods in. And again, that's a choice on my part. I had been choosing women like that. Okay, so I'm not blaming that on anything. I had made the choice to engage in those types of relationships. So this question of, why, if I got out of prison, why didn't I immediately turn things around? I got out of prison in 2011. It took me until 2014. I got married in 2015, so it took me 2014. That's when I recidivated, went back to prison for 10 months. And then that was the turnaround right there, especially when I came out and I reached out to Keith Malarski of the FBI, and he validated this thing of, can I turn my life around? He gave me that validation. I would say, when they asked me on that podcast, I couldn't really answer that. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And that's another reason I wanted to do this show. Once a crook, always a crook. I worry. I would say that before the pandemic, I worried a lot about, hey, am I going to be able to stay legal? But the pandemic showed me that I was actually a hell of a lot stronger than I thought I was. Not only was I stronger, but I realized that I have a support group. I was talking to that Mr. Allison just a few minutes ago. I have a support group of people who care about me, who want to make sure that I succeed, and they really are there to help me along the way. FBI is there, people in the cybersecurity industry, my family. I said during one interview that I don't have any friends. I have friends. I have trouble recognizing that and accepting that. But I do have friends. But all these people want me to succeed. Even the people who watch my show, I get messages all the time. I mean, all the friggin' time about people who, what I've talked about has resonated with them, and it makes a difference. So this show, once a crook, always a crook. It's why does it take so long for Brett Johnson to turn his life around? It's the I don't like to blame it on childhood, but I think part of it is a childhood. That groundwork was laid of being in a criminal environment, finding comfort in that environment, and fear of change. There's a reason that, when I had that scholarship to be an actor, and my mom pulls a knife on the director, the guy who gave me the scholarship, and it all falls apart. I didn't pursue it after that because I found comfort in that wallowing in self-pity. Sometimes it's easier to just wallow in self-pity and continue doing what in this case, self-pity and criminal actions, than it is to change, that fear of changing. And it wasn't until I made the choice, hey, I'm going to take that step, I'm going to try it, that things worked out. And what I found out since that point is that, fear, there's a real fear in doing something that you've never done before, in taking that step of change. But what I found out that in doing that is that every single thing that I've done past that point, all these steps that I've taken, that first step was the hardest. But after that, everything has been just like positive, every single thing. If I know that if I'm worried about something and I approach it head on, more often than not, it has resulted in positive benefits for me, my family, the industry, things like that. Why did it take so long? I think it's fear of change. I think it was comfort in criminal activity, continuing to know what I was, that I knew how to do it. Fear of doing it. It's just a variety of things that resulted in that. And I've got to think more on that, because I can't I really want to be able to give a clear, concise, concrete answer to that. And I really can't. I think maybe I have, and just don't realize it yet. But I wanted to point that out. Tim McGinnis, he's the founder of Scars. I posted made a post a couple weeks ago. This guy in Atlanta, or in Georgia, an inmate had died from bed bug bites. And it got me hard. I'd actually kind of forgotten some of the stuff that I'd went through in prison, and not only me, but other inmates had went through in prison. There were instances, there were a couple of systems, like in Atlanta, for example, Atlanta holding at the maximum penitentiary there. You would have to, so they had one bunk in the rooms, but they would have 4 and 5 people in the room. So the rest of us slept on the floor, and you'd get a mat. And if you were lucky, you'd get what they call a boat, which was a plastic, about 4 to 6 inches plastic board that set off the floor that you'd put your mat on, so you wouldn't have to sleep directly on the floor. The reason I bring that up is we would have to take our towels and roll them and stuff under the door at night so that the rats wouldn't come in on us, or else you'd find a rat in your bunk, or on your mat. And if you were sleeping on the floor, you were really worried about that, because the rat wouldn't have to climb up on top of the bunk or the plastic boat that you'd put your mat on. So you'd always hear people getting bit by rats, and that was one of the things that I remembered about this guy that prompted the memory from this guy that died from bedbug bites. It didn't surprise me at all that the guy had suffered from that. But yeah, we'd have to do that. You in Atlanta, you couldn't leave any food out because the rats would come in and tear into it. So you couldn't, you'd go to commissary, or you'd have commissary delivered to the cell, and anything that was left open, you'd have to throw away or wrap up in plastic, put away so rats couldn't get to it. It was very common, very common. Then there's another jail system I was in that you'd have to take your pillowcase and you'd wrap it around your head and tie it in a knot tight, and you'd have to make sure that it was pretty tight around there so that the roaches wouldn't crawl on your face or in your nose or in your mouth while you slept. So Tim McGinnis, he said that had affected him pretty hard, and he asked me to do a show, I guess, talking about prison nightmare stories, and I don't know if I can do that. I don't. I'll tell you a couple other things. First guy I saw commit suicide, and I think I mentioned this before. First guy I saw commit suicide was in Lexington, South Carolina, at the county jail. There was the pod, county jail. So you had upstairs and downstairs. You were in a pod. They call them a pod cell system. So you had upstairs, downstairs, and around that outer perimeter were the cells, both upstairs and downstairs. And inside of that, you had the metal picnic tables and stuff like that. And we were under a 23-hour-a-day lockdown. You got out an hour a day to shower, bullshit with other inmates, whatever you're doing. The other 23 hours, you were in a 6x9 cell, 3 to 4 of you in that cell. Okay. So it was very overcrowded and things like that. And first guy I ever saw commit suicide, because they mixed you in with the federal inmates and the state inmates too. So you'd have people in there for drunk driving, bullshit like that. But this kid had been in, he was under a $600 bond. He had broken a window on a bicycle store, and he just needed to pay the bond. He'd get out, but he couldn't afford the bond, and he was in there. He had been in there for a few weeks, and he was taking it hard. One of the things that you see about people that are incarcerated, most people can deal with incarceration. It'll take them a couple of days to get used to it, at most a week. All right. But most people can acclimate to that environment readily. All right. Some people can't. So I've seen people that will sit there and constantly scream. I've seen people that will beat their head up against a wall, just bam, 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 until it starts to bleed, stuff like, because they have a lot of trouble coping with that. And typically what happens at that point is they grab your ass. If you're like that, the constant screamer, banging your head, anything else like that, they'll take your ass, they'll take all the clothes off of you. They'll give you this kind of suicide-proof gown that goes off. They give you a bare mat, no mattress, no sheets, no covers, anything else, and they put you in an observation tank until you calm your ass down, is what typically happens. So this kid, he was just going through it hard. Now that pod system, there was a guard in there with us. So what happens is we're out during that 1 hour. Kid gets up. He walks upstairs. He steps over the banister. He jumps right there, lands flat, just bam. And we thought the guy was dead. We thought this kid was dead. And the guard, so the guard's got a button on his hip where he could press, and all the Ninja Turtles would come in. The guard's in shock. The guard's just sitting there like, God damn. So we thought this kid was dead, but what happens is the kid starts to move, and you can hear the guard. So the kid starts to move. Kid gets up, stands there a second, and the guard's just in shock, and the kid starts to walk back toward the steps, and he starts walking up the steps, and by this time you can hear the guard going, no, no. Kid walks up the steps. The guard is never hitting the button at all. Kid walks up the steps. Guard's saying no. The kid gets up to the platform, steps over the banister again, jumps again, and lands on his head. And he didn't get up from that one. That was the first guy I ever saw commit suicide right there. And I got to see 4 suicides while I was locked up. One guy in Tallahassee at the federal holding ties a sheet around his neck. We had bunk beds. He ties a sheet around his neck, ties it to the top of the bunk bed. He just sits down and hangs himself like that. Another guy in Fort Worth. This guy had actually been incarcerated for 6 or 7 years, and he gets the call. He calls his girlfriend, and she tells him that she's breaking up with him. There's somebody else. So in federal system, you've got a 4 o'clock stand-up count nationwide. Every inmate at 4 p.m. They stand up, guards come, and they do a hand count. So this guy during the hand count tells the guard, "Hey, I've got to shit, man. I got to go to the bathroom." Guard's like, "Hurry up and go." So he goes to the bathroom, doesn't come back, and what had happened was that he takes his belt, hangs himself from a pipe, kills himself. That was so bad that the counselor on that unit quit a week later. So that's some of the stuff you see. The first person I ever saw murdered, we were walking the track, and that evening we were walking the track, and this all the inmates walking the track, you see it's like a flock of birds. They just start moving, migrating from the top of the key down, and you look in the distance, and one inmate's got another one down. He's just got his head down on the pavement, just driving his head into the pavement. And the thing is that the guards don't stop that, because guards don't want to get hurt. So it took them 15 minutes to come out. And at that point in time, the guy doesn't have a back of a head, so he's dead. And the investigation is just a dog and a pony show. What happens is that they shut the compound down, lock everything down. A couple of days later, they make 2 lines of all the inmates, and you go in this little room, and they ask you some questions. And the questions they ask, did you see anything? And you say no. The next question is, if you would have seen anything, would you tell us? And the answer is no. And then they look at you and say, get the fuck out of here. Exact words, get the fuck out of here. And that's the investigation. So that's what I saw. And I saw 2 people murdered. Went through 3 riots. And riots were interesting. At the riot, first riot, you're scared to death. I still remember that first riot, man. You don't know what's going on. Don't have a clue. And you're just scared to death. So you start to, the other newbies in prison, you start to, barricade the door so nobody can come in on you. And then the Ninja Turtles come out with the tear gas and rubber bullets and all that bullshit. And you finally get back in your bunk, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning after all night. And so you're scared to death the first one. Second one, things start to calm down for you, because it's not your first rodeo. So you're going through it a second time, and you start to notice that, hey, it's the Hispanics and the African Americans that are rioting. Hell, it's not me. So by the time the third one runs around, because by that point you start to learn that, hey, these are race riots. So the third one, you lay in your bunk, reading a book or trying to read a book, and you let the other 2 groups wage war with each other. And that's the way that shit works. I don't think I can do an episode of talking about just the horrors of prison, because they are absolutely there. You get guys that we had, when I was in Fort Worth, we ran out of meat in the kitchen. So you'd go to get your meal, and there wouldn't be any meat. You ate a lot of beans and rice. and nobody knew what was going on with the meat. And what was happening was, as some of the people in the kitchen were stealing the meat, the fourth floor of the prison, the inmates up there, they were stealing all the meat out of the kitchen, and they had built themselves an ice locker. So they were not only stealing all the meat, but they were taking all the ice out of all the ice machines, and they had built a makeshift cooler to hold it all. And then they were selling meat on the side, and everybody else suffering because of that. You had people that, the gangs ran it. And for the most part, the gangs kept everything quiet and peaceful. But, when I was at Big Spring, the Pisas ran that compound. So if, say, a Serrano came on the compound, they would know when he got off the bus. And typically they would go up to him and say, hey, you're not allowed on the compound. Most of the time, the Serrano at that point in time would check in. So he'd go to protective custody, and he'd sit there, a few months until they shipped his ass to another compound. Sometimes you'd get some idiot that would say, no, I'm not. And the Pisa would look and say, hey, we know that you're with this other gang. And the guy would go, I'm not with a gang. And the Pisa would look at him and say, you're sure? And the guy would go, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, come on in then. So what would happen is when lights would go out, 11 o'clock at night, when the lights would go out, some guy would put, ski mask on, and he'd take his master lock, he'd put it in a sock, or more often just wrap it around a belt. So he'd have a makeshift mace, and he'd just come up to this guy that lied about being in a gang, and he would beat the shit out of him with a lock. Wouldn't kill him. He'd just beat the shit out of him with a lock. And then that guy that got beaten would oftentimes have to just crawl to the door, and they'd take him out. And of course, the compound would get locked down for a few days. I mean, that's prison. I don't want you guys to think that it was all negative, because there are absolutely benefits to prison. And I did a show on that on the Brett Johnson show. This thing of you're met. It's weird. The inmates, for the most part, look after each other. I can't count the times that I've went to a county jail or enter into a real prison, and somebody comes up to you, hey, do you need anything? Shower shoes. Do you need hygiene? A bar of soap, shampoo, toothbrush, toothpaste. We know you're dirty. Well, you got clothes until you get to commissary. What do you got? What can we do for you? And that was typical. What do you need? Somebody that doesn't have anything that comes to you and says, hey, what can I do for you? Doesn't know you from Adam, but hey, what do you need? You can just pay me back when you go to commissary. And that was typical. Or, you'd get bad news from home. Somebody would, and then you'd see all these inmates that would gather around this guy. Hey man, let's go out and do something. Let's get your mind off this, right? You'd see that all the time. Or somebody would go to medical, and they'd get bad medical news. Hey, your ass is about to fucking die. And you'd see these other guys that, hey, what can we do for you? Let's help you. Let's get you out here and start exercising. Let's, whatever we got to do. So it was really a degree of family for the most part. So I don't want you guys to think that it was just, it was a horrible environment. It was truly a horrible environment. But there were things that, there was compassion, charity, that type of brotherly love, that is that camaraderie that really, it's hard to find that in today's free world. So I just thought I'd mention that, that prison experience. So maybe that'll satisfy Mr. McGinnis. The meat of the show is once a crook, always a crook. I've done shows about Frank Abagnale, about him lying. I've got friends now like Matt Cox. I'm going to tell you out of the gate, I didn't know Matt was going to be a friend of mine. I had no idea how we were going to interact or anything else, but I consider Matt Cox, former United States most wanted mortgage fraudster. I absolutely consider him a friend. I absolutely do. I think that he's an outstanding guy. He is not everyone's cup of tea, nor am I. I've been called an asshole more than once. The reviews of my show talk about how I scream, how we can't stand him, how he comes off with an asshole, as an asshole. Talk about me. I cannot disagree with you on that. I absolutely agree with that. We are not everyone's cup of tea. But the question is once you are a crook, are you always going to be a crook? And my thought on that is that I think you always have the criminal mindset. I think that I think that's ingrained in you. It's certainly ingrained in me. You know, I hear about a scam, and you know, you'll see me start to chuckle because I'm like, oh, that's a good one. You know, maybe did he do this? Did he do that? And I constantly think, well, you know, I could have improved upon it, or maybe I couldn't have improved upon it. You know, I hear some of Matt Cox's stories and some of the scams that he ran. You can't improve on that bullshit at all. That dude was doing everything the way he fucking needed to do it. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to act upon that. You know, I like pandemic fraud, for example. I mean, it was not rocket science on how to commit that fraud. It's not. That was a very easy fraud, a very extremely profitable fraud to commit. I talked about before, you know, there were 16-year-olds on Telegram stealing $60,000 a week. I am not a 16-year-old. I'm a 53-year-old, and I know my shit. So it would have been very easy for me to pocket several $1 million committing unemployment fraud. Very easy, but I chose not to do that. I made a conscious decision. I was scared I was going to, but I made a conscious choice not to do that. Matt, I think, does that every single day as well. You know, he makes a choice not to commit crime, and he's getting stronger as he goes along. I think he's firmly on the good guy side of the fence. He works his ass off every day. I work my ass off every day. You know, turning it around. Because Fraud Unmasked on LinkedIn, they have given more than one example of fraudsters who have claimed to be living legitimate legal lives, and then they recidivate. Then they go off and, you know, steal $100,000 from an employer, $1 million from somebody who took a chance on them, and things like that. As I said, it's very rare that you get a fraudster that decides, that really makes that decision and turns their life around. And it's a decision. What causes people to recidivate? I really thought during the pandemic that I was going to go back and commit crime. I really did. I had no doubt about it. None. All right. As a matter of fact, I went and bought prepaid debit cards because I anticipated that was going to happen. I was really convinced of that. But what happened was that, remember I talked about fear of change. Now that first step is the scariest. First step of deciding not to break the law anymore, of I'm going to turn my life around. That was a very scary thing for me. I didn't know if it was going to work or not. But every step after that has been easier. What happened with me is I verbalized the fear I had of breaking the law. I told my wife, I told my sons, told my sister, I told associates, I told the FBI, I told everybody and anybody that would listen. And that support group that I had built from LinkedIn and my interactions with people and my family, that mattered. Me voicing that. I had people, and that's what I told this Mike Allison guy. You know, I had built a safety group, a support group of people who were healthy for me. And by me verbalizing that gave that opportunity for that support group to come into play. I think that these guys who have recidivated, you know, Fraud Unmasked gave an example of this one individual, but they've given examples of other individuals as well, of other fraudsters who have went back to commit crime. I really do believe that those individuals have not voiced that concern, and they've not had that support group that would help them get through those types of problems, those types of temptations, those types of fears of going back to commit crime. I think that if you have that support group in place, I really think that's one of the most important things that you can possibly have to make sure that you don't recidivate. Now, they tell you when you leave prison, get yourself a job, get you something you care about, and you won't recidivate. I absolutely agree with that. But I also think that you have to add in a support group of people that will look out for you. You know, AA has that. Alcoholics Anonymous has that group that of peers who understand, and they're there for you. There's a reason you go to those AA meetings, and that's so you have that support group. You have people, hey, we believe in you. We've been there. We know what's going on. I don't think that, your regular support group knows what's going on, but if you pick people that are healthy and surround yourself with the type of people that you want to be, and then you're open and you share those thoughts and feelings and temptations and fears with them, I absolutely believe that they're going to look out for your best interest. Because it's happened with me. I absolutely believe that. So, turning it around, these people who have recidivated, I really think that it's that whole process of not speaking up, of not verbalizing what's going on. That's what I think. And I think that's how you stay that way. I really do. I think that that with me, I led a lifetime of not being open. And I fully believe that Matt Cox led that lifetime too. There's a reason that he does his show. And yes, it makes money. Yes, it's really popular, but it's also this avenue for him to voice the shit that he's going through. We had the show that I recorded with him just 3 days ago. We just had a talk, man, about a lot of this shit. It's the ability to voice these concerns that really, I think, allows me as a former criminal, to process this stuff, to accept responsibility and accountability and understand my role in my own decision-making, and to fight against that recidivating. Just my thought on that. Just my thought. Fraud Unmasked asked about, what could the prison system do to make sure that someone doesn't recidivate. For much of the United States prison system, it's a dog and pony show. The prison systems are not there to rehabilitate. They are there to punish. All right. Now, absolutely, in federal prison and some state prisons, you have systems, you have programs that are, I think, just on a very superficial level, are meant to give the inmates something to do when they get out. So you have carpentry. Okay. You have some systems have the CDL program where you can get a CDL license, although they don't, learn how to drive a truck. They have electricians. They have dog training programs. They have horse training programs. There's a set number of programs that are Fort Worth had one for where you can make dental not implants, but like the false teeth, where you could learn how to make those. So they have all these programs in place. All right. The truth of the matter is that a very limited number of inmates are allowed in those programs. The other truth is that, yes, even though you have the programs, you still get your ass out and you're a felon. Guess what? Who's an employer going to give a job to? The convicted felon, drug dealer, thief, what have you, murderer, or the person who has the exact same qualifications or better qualifications that doesn't have a criminal record. That is not rocket science. All right. So a lot of the programs are there just kind of as a dog and pony show. I think that a degree of honesty towards those inmates that are coming out of prison would be very effective. It's going to be near impossible for you to get a job. Really, if you want to succeed, you need to be self-employed. Me, I'm self-employed. Matt Cox, he's self-employed. As a matter of fact, every single inmate that I can think of, if they have found success economically, they have found success through running their own business. Because it's very difficult to find somebody that's going to hire you. It can happen. It can absolutely happen. But it's very difficult. And I think that prisons need to be honest about that. I also think that this cognitive behavioral therapy program it's only offered in federal systems. It's only offered to inmates who qualify for the drug program. That's what they teach you at the drug program is CBT. I think that should be mandatory for every single inmate that's out there. Everyone. Now, the problem with that is that, unfortunately, as I said, a lot of prison is dog and pony. It needs to be, you need to have counselors and people who run the prisons, those guards and counselors that are in there. You need to make sure that they care about things. And that becomes very difficult because they get to see a bunch of assholes every single day and they become jaded. They get to where they don't care, because if the inmates don't care, why should they care? So you really have to, it's you talk about systemic things. I think it's systemic, the problems of prison, of it being more punishment-based than rehab-based. I think that there has to be an entire revamping of the prison system. And there's a problem with that, and it's called money. It's going to take a lot of money to do that. And then you have that conversation of, well, do we pay to reform prison, which is going to take money from people that we could pay to maybe make their college less expensive, people who don't break the law. So that argument between the two, and I've got to say, I veer more on the side of benefiting people who have not broken the law. But I also understand that, hey, you're going to pay for the people who break the law, either by housing them in prison or by helping them be successful citizens. So it's a huge conversation, but I think that out of the gate that prison could be more honest with inmates instead of feeding them a bullshit line of, when we left federal prison, we had to come up with a budget. This is where you're going to work. This is how you're going to spend your money. This is where you're going to live. This is what's going to happen. None of that shit panned out because none of that shit's for real. All right. Then they had you thinking you were going to get a job. No, you're not. I think that degree of honesty matters. I think that people, places, and things matter, so that when the inmate's being released, that inmate doesn't go back to the same people, places, and things, that same environment that they were in, that they were committing crime in. You need to have that disconnect from that. You need to get away from that. It's like an addict. You have to get away from those people, places, and things. So honesty, the environment, there has to be a degree, some avenue towards success. The way that I found success is that I had people that I could never possibly repay, that didn't owe me anything, that took a chance on me, that gave me that ability to speak and be paid for it, to consult and be paid for it. AARP, all these other people, Microsoft, they gave me the opportunity. I think it's systemic. I think that unless we as a society really take the steps, I was very fortunate. But I think unless we take the steps to really try to make sure that the people that are committing crime don't, and that the people who have committed crime, once they're released, that we try to make sure that they're released as good, productive citizens and given the opportunity to be good, productive citizens. I don't think it's going to work. The cyber criminals that are out there right now that are committing crime, a lot of us, and I say us because I used to be one, still got the criminal mindset, but a lot of us, we justified our crimes, and we continue. A lot of criminals continue to do that online. You say, well, I'm not stealing from people, I'm stealing from businesses or from the government. I think that it would be very beneficial if the discussion moved into who the victims really are. That it's not a victimless crime. You're not just stealing credit card numbers and the bank's paying for it. No, the bank's passing that on to other people, and the identities that you're stealing, you're actually hurting those people a great deal. I think that we don't get a lot of discussion about who the victims are and the damage that's done. And because of that, it allows a lot of cyber criminals to continue to delude themselves about it being a victimless crime. That's just my thought. Once a crook, always a crook? I don't think so. I think that I think a lot of people do recidivate. I do know that when you leave prison, every single person that I've ever seen leave prison, they don't walk out of prison and want to commit crime again. Most of us, and I was a little different because I had, issues, but most people that I saw left prison with the idea of, I'm going to lead a good life. I've got a lot of promise out there. I'm going to do that. And it goes south pretty quickly, because you're released from prison with the exact same tools you go in with. And I think that's probably the case with me too. I had a lot of hope when I got out of, I'll speak, I'll consult, I'll be this Frank Abagnale guy. And I didn't understand that that's a long, hard trip. I got there, but it's a long, hard road to get there. I think a lot of people think that they're going to be able to get jobs and be productive, and then they find out they can't, and they rely on that tool set with which they entered prison with. Once a crook, always a crook. I don't think so. I think that I think it's a choice. These people who have recidivated, I think that that's another thing that has to happen is you have to instill in that individual that everything is a choice. There's no such thing of, I didn't have a choice, I had to commit crime. No, you did. You did. It was your choice to do it. But that's part of society too. We live in a society now that that everybody wants a scapegoat. Well, you're not responsible. You didn't have any, you had to get out of your neighborhood. It's systemic in the system. No, things may be systemic, but at the end of the day, there is still the choice on the part of that human being, whether to commit crime or whether not to commit crime, whether to do whatever. All right. My name is Brett Johnson. Hopefully I've made some sense today. My name is Brett Johnson. What do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. More importantly, my name is Brett Johnson. At the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. Until next time, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, taking the time to listen to me and giving me that opportunity to lead this life. I truly do appreciate it. Until next time, take care.